My name is Rachel Turner. I'm 42 years old, and I live in a small town in Colorado with my husband, Ethan. We've been married for 15 years, and like most marriages, ours has seen its fair share of ups and downs. Ethan is one of those men who never meets a stranger. He's friendly, warm, and loyal to the bone, sometimes to a fault. When we first got married, I loved that about him. He'd invite people over for dinner, organize barbecues, and always be there for his friends. But as time went on, I started feeling like his friends were becoming a bigger part of our marriage than I was. It started with Mark, Ethan's best friend from college. He was loud, funny, and loved to tell stories that made everyone laugh. Then there was Lucas, the quiet one who always had some thoughtful advice or a way of calming everyone down. And finally, Aaron, who was a bit of a wild card, unpredictable but good-hearted. Ethan had known them long before me, and they shared a bond that I sometimes felt like an outsider to. They had inside jokes, traditions, even their own yearly fishing trip. I never minded it much, until last year. It was a crisp Saturday morning in September when Ethan told me the guys were coming over for the weekend. It'll just be the four of us, Rach, he said with that charming grin that always made me cave. You'll finally get to relax a bit. I'll handle the food. I smiled and agreed, though deep down, I wasn't sure how relaxing it would be. The last time his friends came over, they stayed up till 3 in the morning, laughing so loudly the neighbors complained. But this time, something felt different. When Mark, Lucas, and Aaron arrived, I noticed how much older they all looked. Time had settled in around their eyes, but the warmth between them was still the same. They hugged Ethan like he was a brother they hadn't seen in years. Watching them filled me with something unexpected, nostalgia. I remembered the early years of our marriage, when Ethan and I would stay up talking about dreams, travel plans, and silly things that didn't matter. Now, our conversations mostly revolved around bills, the car, or his work. That first evening, while the men grilled outside, I watched from the kitchen window. They looked like boys again, laughing, teasing, shouting at the grill smoke. It made me realize something. Friendship was its own kind of love. One that demanded no promises, no conditions, yet still managed to anchor people in the hardest storms. After dinner, I joined them for coffee on the patio. The air was chilly, but the laughter was warm. Lucas asked me how my art was going. I used to paint, but I hadn't touched a brush in months. Life had gotten too busy. I've been thinking of starting again, I admitted. You should, Lucas said softly. You always lit up when you talked about it. Something in his tone made me pause. Not romantic, but sincere. It felt like he'd been paying attention all these years, even when I thought no one noticed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I heard the faint hum of conversation from downstairs. Ethan and his friends were talking about life, about how things changed after 40, about losing people they loved. At one point, I heard Ethan say, Rachel's been my anchor through it all. I just don't say it enough. I froze. My heart swelled. It was something I hadn't heard in a long time. Sometimes, love hides in silence, not because it's gone, but because we forget how to show it. The next morning, I made pancakes for everyone. Aaron teased me, Ethan, you're lucky, man. Rachel's still spoiling you after 15 years. Ethan laughed. Don't let her fool you. She's tougher than she looks. We all laughed, but beneath the humor, I felt warmth return between Ethan and me. As the weekend went on, something began to shift. The house, once filled with noise, began to fill with meaning. Ethan's friends helped fix the broken fence in our backyard without me asking. When they saw my old art supplies in the garage, they insisted on setting up a small corner for me to paint again. Consider it our contribution to your comeback, Mark said with a grin. By Sunday evening, my heart was lighter than it had been in months. The men were packing up to leave, and the house suddenly felt too quiet. Ethan wrapped his arms around me and whispered, You okay? I am, I said, smiling. I think this weekend reminded me how lucky we are. He nodded. I was thinking the same thing. We stood there in silence, watching his friends drive off, until the taillights disappeared. Weeks passed, but something from that weekend stayed with us. Ethan started spending more time at home, cooking dinner with me, asking about my paintings. And I began to understand that love doesn't always need to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's in the quiet gestures, the way he made my coffee just right, or the way he'd sit beside me while I painted. Months later, I had my first small art exhibit in town. Ethan invited all his friends. When I looked out into the crowd and saw them there, smiling, clapping, it hit me. Love and friendship weren't competing forces. They were allies. Mark walked up after the show, handing me a small bouquet. We're proud of you, Rachel. You brought something beautiful back into this house. That night, as Ethan and I sat together by the window, he said something I'll never forget. You know, Rach, my friends always admired you. Not because you're my wife, but because you've got this quiet strength that brings people together. You did that again. I didn't know what to say, so I just held his hand. Life didn't change overnight. We still had bills, work, and everyday stress. But something deeper had shifted. I started painting regularly. Ethan started taking more time off to be with me. And every few months, his friends would visit, not to drink or party, but just to sit around the table, share stories, and laugh like old times. It became our new tradition. Looking back now, I realize that love isn't just about romance, it's about understanding, patience, and being there for each other through every phase. And friendship, when pure and loyal, becomes the glue that holds all of that together. Sometimes we take the people closest to us for granted, not because we don't love them, but because we assume they'll always be there. That weekend taught me never to assume, but to cherish. Today, when I paint, I often capture those small moments, the laughter, the warm light, the coffee mugs on the patio table. They remind me that love doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it looks like three old friends fixing a fence, or a husband whispering, "Thank you," when he thinks you're asleep. And that's the kind of love that lasts forever.